I'm going to really try to be as sort of civil and polite as I can, and maybe my mind will be changed, because in this world, things are changing so fast. Why wouldn't your mind change? So maybe you can change my mind. I would say on the question of this group of migrants coming north, the one that came 3 months ago coming north, the 22 million who are currently living here illegally, it's all sort of species of the same question, which is the first question. I mean, there are many questions, and one of them is, how do you help other people? And a lot of smart people run NGOs are thinking about that in Washington, and some are doing a good job, others are not. But the main question the U.S. government has to answer is, how do we enforce our laws voted on democratically by our Congress? And how do we protect our people, the people to whom we have really the only duty that we have, right? I mean, the purpose of the government is to protect you and to help you. And again, I'm a Christian, and I think I'm a person of not particularly good faith, but decent faith, okay? So I'm always sort of for helping people, but the government's job is to represent the voters and enforce the laws that they sent their representatives to Washington to pass. And that's kind of all their job is, actually. So our law says that you need permission to come into this country, and that is the law of every country that is a country. And without that, you're sort of not a country. So, I mean, you could ask the obvious question, which is, there are an awful lot of poor people around the world. Does everyone have a right to come here and go on Medicaid? I don't know. I mean, if you think so, let's, speak slowly so I can understand, and let's talk it through. And tell me why. Where does that obligation come from exactly? Is it written in the Constitution? Is it in the Bible? What exactly are you saying? But you're not hearing that. Instead, you're hearing an awful lot of the kind of moral bullying that has come to characterize all of our political conversations, where the person you're debating, in this case I'm debating, begins with the presumption of, I'm a better person than you. I care more deeply for these people than you do, and if you were a good person, you would agree with me. Well, I mean, that's a theological debate. And I reserve a huge part of Sundays for those. But that's not really a public policy debate. There isn't much of a public policy debate here. Our laws are as they are, and if you want to change them, send representatives to Washington and do that, and maybe we're about to see that happen. But there's a massive cost to any government saying, because of political pressure, temporary political pressure, we're going to ignore our own laws. Then, well, why can't I ignore the law? I pay way more taxes than I feel like paying. There are all kinds of things that I would like to ignore. Anyway, so I'm not really sure what the debate is, to be totally blunt with you, other than the virtue debate, which is not interesting.
Let's go to Cenk here.
Yeah. All right, so let's break it down. And backstage, we had far too much agreement, so let's break that up. So first of all, on the caravan, I feel like Fox News, from time to time, touches on it, but overall misleads. And I'll tell you why, Tucker. It makes it sound like the caravan's going to come in and bust through a gate of some sort and then go ravaging in the country. Well, the reality is, the reason they're in a caravan is because they're seeking asylum. So if they wanted to sneak into the country, they wouldn't do it in a giant caravan. So, and so when you're talking about the laws, there are also laws in place on how to seek asylum. And that is exactly what they're following. So that caravan actually, in a way, should be celebrated, because they are not going to cross the border illegally. They are going to go to a port where you ask for asylum. Now Donald Trump is suggesting that we should reject asylum out of hand without talking to people. Now, that is not the law, and that is not the American way. And so, and Tucker, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I'm not trying to compare you or Fox News or anybody to this. I'm just giving an extreme example of what happens when you don't listen to people. So we've done that in the past. In the 1930s and 40s, Jews came here on boats asking for asylum, and we sent them back. And one particular ship that came to Florida that was sent back, 25% of those people were murdered in a concentration camp. And God knows what happened to the other 75%. There's sometimes a good reason to hear them out. And what we're asking for is something very simple, and that is within the law, hear them out. It's not too much to ask for.
So I'll let the whole Nazi reference go unremarked upon. But I would say, look, if I have one criticism of Americans is they haven't traveled enough. And I know you have traveled a lot, and one thing you learn when you travel is there are a lot of really hurting parts of the world. So nothing that is happening in Guatemala right now, or Honduras, or Salvador, is unique to those countries, or even to Central America, Latin America, or even this hemisphere. That kind of thing is happening all over the world, where for a bunch of different reasons, most of them political, millions upon millions, billions in fact, of people are suffering and desperate. And of course, my heart goes out to all of them. The question is, what duty does the US government have to them? And I would argue it doesn't have a duty to them, okay? It has a duty to its own people. Now that's not, again, I think people of goodwill have a lot they can do to help those people, okay? I do think that. But the government is something very different. And I would also argue that there is a cost to this, a cost that the left used to recognize. It was once obvious. So I grew up in this state in Southern California, and Cesar Chavez was a hero. I mean, we have a day in California dedicated to his memory. And Cesar Chavez, among many other things, he was a serious leftist, an economic leftist, he was a socialist. But among many other things, he was passionately, in fact, violently anti-immigration. Why? Because he was anti-Mexican? I mean, he was of Mexican descent, of course not. Because he led a labor union, and he understood that supply and demand is a real thing. And if you have an overabundance of anything, its value falls. That's why sand is cheap. So if you let people in from poor countries willing to work for less, your wages fall, particularly at the bottom end, among your most vulnerable. This was axiomatic on the left for 100 years. All of our anti-immigration laws were the result of lobbying from organized labor, from Democrats, because they had a responsibility to their people. And Republicans, management, the people who owned the fruit companies, who hired the pickers, were totally for unrestrained immigration, legal and illegal, because it made their labor costs lower. So I would only say, and it's a more complicated question than just this, but this is a huge part of it. It's one of the reasons that wages have stalled. And for some categories of people, high school educated people, they've gone down over the last 30 years. Like, this is a real thing. And the last thing I'll say is if you bring this up, everyone wants to make a race question out of it. You don't like them because they're different. Oh, please. There's nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with what kind of country you want to live in. Do you want to live in a country where people with very little economic power have even less? Then open the doors, and that's what you'll get.
All right, so a lot to respond to there. So let's break it down one by one. First of all, this is a country, and this is not a cliche, it's true, this is a country made of immigrants. I'm an immigrant, and I came in a legal way. So, and I want to support that, and I think that that's not a matter of doing me a favor, it's not a matter of doing someone from Honduras a favor, it's a matter of what is best for the country. And I think immigrants have built this country, whether they were Italian, Irish, Chinese, Jewish, and Mexican. Yes, they have built this country. And so I think that is a great value to the country. In fact, there is demagoguery about how immigrants keep taking from us. But the reality is, and every study shows this, since a lot of the undocumented immigrants pay into Social Security and Medicare as part of the payroll taxes, but never get it out, they actually put more taxes into the system than they take out of the system. And so if we're talking about what is the correct policy to have, so there is a discussion about reform in Congress that's gone nowhere, but the idea there was to take indentured servitude and double it. And that if you work here for 14 years, if you're undocumented, you could have a pathway to citizenship. Now, the right wing said that's too lenient. I don't know if they want 3 times indentured servitude. I don't know. But my answer is, look, can we at least go back to indentured servitude? So if for 7 years they work and they pay their dues, have they not done enough and shown enough to become U.S. citizens? That means they are adding to our country. They are not taking away from our country. So that is a proposal that I believe in and that I will fight for. And immigrants are a net positive in almost every way imaginable, and also demagoguery on the issue of criminality. The reality is native-born Americans, unfortunately, commit crime at over twice the rate of undocumented immigrants. So if we're going to kick anyone out, it would be us. Well, not me, because I wasn't born here. But of course we're not going to do that either, because we all work together and we can win together. Now, in terms of wages, Tucker is absolutely right that wages have been stagnant. and they have been stagnant since about 1978. Productivity has not. The American worker has been wonderfully productive. It has gone up by over 200% since that time. But if you're looking to see who took your wages, don't look down, look up. The guy, just last thought here, the guy who walked in and crossed the border without a penny to his name did not somehow rig the rules. No, the person who rigged the rules are the ones that are paying the politicians. Campaign contributions are unadulterated bribery. They're absolutely, positively bribery, and they are done to maintain power for the economic elite. And that is what's keeping your wages stagnant.
Well, I kind of, let me just say, I kind of agree with some of that, unexpectedly, but I think you're right. I mean, I don't blame really immigrants for anything. As people, the policies are not formulated by them. The question is who benefits from our current system, which is clearly totally dysfunctional. If you have 20 million or 22 million, north of 20 million people without papers in your country, it's clearly not working. So the question is who's benefiting from that? And there's an entire political party that hopes to sort of have a new voter base on the basis of those people. And you have, that's true, as you know. And I don't think anyone's hiding it, by the way. And if you're for that party, I mean, I guess you're for that. And then there are also, and I think you alluded to this, a lot of employers who are benefiting from that. But, and by the way, you're also right that a lot of immigrants are in fact exploited. I mean, we've created an entire serf class to serve the day-to-day needs of the rich. Like, that's just true. And by the way, if you want to see the most intense opponents of changing or fixing our immigration system, talk to like some rich people in my neighborhood. And it's like, well, who's going to walk the dogs while I'm at SoulCycle? Like, I'm serious. And they have I mean, we're doing that. And most people are not benefiting. Only a small number is benefiting. So, look, I would agree with a lot of what you said, or certainly the tenor of what you said. It's not their fault. But it does get to a core question, which is, do you, as a U.S. citizen, have the right to have any voice at all in who comes in? Because demographics is like one of the key questions. Who lives here? Again, not a racial question. It's a substantive factual question. And I don't think you'll find many people in this country who are opposed to immigration. We have more immigrants, aggregate, total immigrants, than any country's ever had in peacetime, ever. Okay? And you don't have riots in the streets. You don't have lunatics. Lots of other countries do. South Africa right now, killing Zimbabweans because they're mad about unchecked immigration. I get it. We don't have that. We like immigrants. The question is, are we allowed to make the decision? It's our country, and in that our, I would include lots of naturalized immigrants, including you. We all have a right to decide. And so to say it's anti-immigrant, look, I'm for dinner parties. I have lots of dinner parties. I love inviting 12 people over to my house and having dinner. If you decided who they were or said you're not allowed to decide who the 12 people are, that wouldn't be a dinner party, would it? It would be an invasion or something. It would be something I'm very much against. So the question is, where is the economic debate? I mean, and what I appreciated about your response was and I disagree with your numbers, but at least you marshaled them. Like, what is the economic effect of this? I grew up in this state. When I grew up here, it was the richest out of 50. It had the best schools out of 50. It had the most vibrant middle class out of 50. It now has, it's 48th for schools. It has more poor people than any state. Its infrastructure is crumbling, and the middle class is living in Boise. So how did that happen? There are lots of reasons it happened, but the truth is, economics is not magic. Importing millions of poor people, every one of them a good person, I'm willing to assume, doesn't make you richer. So the rest of us have a right to have that conversation. That's all I'm saying. Don't shut it down with racist, please.
But Tucker, let me follow up on that. So I think I know why California schools are disastrous, because of the propositions that did not allow us to invest in the schools, and now the private schools have created a way to have rich people bring their kids to one school and then make sure they don't pay for the other. But I wanted to follow up on what you said, because look, on the Statue of Liberty, it says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your masses, etc." And so when the Irish were first coming in, they were dirt poor. They were escaping a famine. The Italians, dirt poor. The Jews, dirt poor. Under your logic, would we not have kept them out?
Well, no, because this is hold on. This is a situational. Before you applaud too vigorously, I can win you. Listen, it's a situational decision. So when we had the largest wave up until recently of immigration into this country at the beginning of the last century, that was the industrialization period in this country. So who manned the factories? Who made the shoes? Who wove the textiles? Immigrants did. There was a massive need for labor, and we responded by importing huge amounts of labor. We did until 1924, in which case Americans, including recent naturalized immigrants, looked around and was like, you know what? We've had a lot of change. Change creates volatility in your society. We had a lot of drama, the progressive movement, the Wobblies. We had a lot going on in this country. We were like, you know what? We're shutting it down. And we shut it down from 1924 to 1965, not because we're racist, but because we made the decision. Now what we're looking at, and this is what drives me maybe craziest, is a landscape totally transformed by technology, by automation. This is not secret knowledge. Look it up. One of the reasons that people are so powerless, they felt they had to vote for Donald Trump, is because the value of labor is in steep decline. Immigration's part of it. Technology, I would argue, is probably even a bigger part of it. Huge sectors of the entire economy are about to be replaced by machines. This will mean massive internal displacement of workers who will have even less power than they do now. Into that, you're throwing a huge number of new people, and my only question is, okay, what are they going to do in a world where a lot of the jobs now occupied by people will be occupied by machines? And the answer I get is, shut up, racist. Okay, fine. That's not actually an answer. And we have an obligation, I think, if those in my business like, try to convince people or whatever, to raise the question. And I can't get anybody on either side to take it seriously at all. And that's when I began to conclude that they're totally reckless. They don't know what they're doing, almost any of them. They're lying about it. And they're wrecking the country because that is a very obvious chain of events that's going to take place. And nobody says it.